my machine out of the way, but it's on. So while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and get my machine ready for stitching. So I have regular thread in, and I'm going to use my J foot. I have a baby lock. I'm going to use my J foot, pardon me, because I can feel a sneeze coming on. So I want to use the piecing stitch. So I know you can't see all the way over here, but if you have a baby lock machine and you paid, I want to say maybe $500 or $600 and up, you should have a straight stitch that has a little letter P. P is in pie, and the stitch will be a little right. Just you tonight, Rhonda? Good. I don't mean good that she's not there. Oh, now I got myself in the wrong place. So we want the straight stitch that has the letter P at the bottom. If you're on a bigger machine, I keep touching stuff here. If you're on one of the bigger baby locks, you might have a tab, a Q tab on the right-hand side of your screen. You know, you got different tabs going down. One of them has a Q for quilting. If you're going to use your J foot and not your stitch in the, not your 1/4 inch foot with the guide, you can use the P stitch. It's a straight stitch, but when you look at the picture of it, it'll be just a little bit right of center. Now you can't use that stitch and your 1/4 inch foot with the guide, because it moves your needle, and your 1/4 inch foot with the guide is a single hole foot. So if you move your needle to the right, the needle's going to come down and hit the metal of your foot, and you're not going to be very happy. If you're using the 1/4 inch foot with a guide, just stay on your regular straight stitch on your utility screen. I think it's stitch number 3. Then I'm just going to use a 2.5 stitch length. So Rhonda, it's just you tonight. You're on your own, huh? So, oh, that's right. She sews with you on Saturdays. So tomorrow the post will go up for the for our project for Saturday, which is a placemat. So if you look on the Miss Loreens Schoolhouse Facebook, tomorrow morning there'll be a picture there and all of the fabric requirements and so forth. Hi, Lynn. Is everybody sewing and cutting and sewing along? So we're making the star block, which looks like that, if you want to see a color picture of it. And in our Build the Block book, it's going to be on page 6, Friendship Star. We're doing a 6-inch block. You can do any size block you like, but we're doing the 6-inch block. And just for a refresher, here's a picture of the project we're going to be working on. So we're doing this block right here first, and next week we're going to be doing the one across from it. And there's a picture of this on the, there'll be a picture of this on the, did I put it on there? Maybe I didn't. I was going to say, maybe I put it today. I might have put it today, a picture of the actual project, which is a table runner. Okay, so Christine is cutting and sewing along with us. I think Rhonda is sewing. I think Lynn is cutting and sewing. So page 6, so you can get on your page 6. And I know, Christine, you might be doing a different block, so you'll just cut along with your block as we cut along. Okay, so page 6, we're doing a 6-inch block, so we need 5 2.5-inch squares and 8 2.5-inch half squares. So you remember the squares Let me see if I can get up here. I get up too close and I make a shadow. So the squares are the four corners of the background fabric and the center block of your focus or your main fabric. So I got to get some fabric out. So first we got to have, so let's get our dies out. So I'm going to get out my square die set, and I need the 2.5 inch square. So it's the third one from the middle. So 1, 2, 3. Third one from the middle. So counting from the center out, third one. And then we need the half square triangle, not the quarter square triangle, but the half square triangle. And we need the 2.5 half square. So if you have your dies, and I know I tell you this every week, but if you have your dies the same way that your picture is, it just makes it easier. So I'm going to be on the bottom right side, and I want the middle one. Okay, so we just need the 2 dies tonight. You should always best press or starch your fabric before you cut. Okay, so Rhonda said she's sewing, and let's see. Lynn is cutting and maybe sewing, and Rhonda is sewing. And we got Christine, she's cutting and sewing. So there's a few of you going. And thanks for joining in. So the first thing I need is some fabric. And I know I set it down here somewhere. And I have some odds and ends pieces. And look, I don't have the best ironing job there. And then I need to pick a fabric for my star. And I guess because I have it gold, I should probably go with the gold. But you remember we did our practice one and I did the gold, so now I'll have 2. So let me try one with a, well, let's see. Let's see what we have here. And this is a little bit more shiny, lighter gold. I'm working from a layer cake. I have a couple of them, so I shouldn't run short. So we got our 2 fabrics, our background fabric and our star fabric. Okay, so everybody all set with that? And let me just move my machine a little out of the way and move this. I just have to make sure that I'm not going to run into my sewing machine because I usually have the little junior out. Okay, so let me move that just for a minute. And I got more things out than I need. So let's see. I'm going to start putting stuff behind me so when I can't find it, you can yell at me. It's behind you, it's behind you. Okay, so I've got my 2 clear plates. So one of them, is the pretty one. And then this plate I had didn't have Gemini written on it, so I had I had to put marker on it so I could figure out one side. And we got our metal plate. So I'm going to lay down my scratched up plate. I'm going to put that down. I'm going to put it this way. Hopefully you can see it all right. Oh, and then I'll put my top is up here. You can start with your Gemini words wherever you want to start. We're just going to make sure we turn it around. I want to put my metal plate down because remember we're cutting down into the fabric. And I have my 2 dies. So if we look at the picture, out of the gold or whatever your focus fabric or main fabric is, we need 1 square and 4 half square triangles. So the first thing I want to do is see which way my straight of grain is. So I'm going to give it a tug and see which one has a little more stretch. So here's my straight of grain here. I'm just going to put it, it makes more sense for me to have it along my left side. Don't ask me why. I'm not sure. Okay, so I have to look and see, okay, how many folds can I get? I only need 1 of the square. We only need 1 of the square for the main fabric. So I'm gonna make it easy on myself. If I was by myself and I could putz around with it, it'd be different. But what I'm gonna do is I only need 1. I'm just going to cut a piece of fabric out. And I'm just going to set that with my die. My die, the ridge is facing down, the smooth side is facing up. Just going to put that there for a minute. I need 4 half square triangles. So I'm going to fold in half. And then I'm going to fold in half again, except I'm going to turn it over because see how I had that piece missing and I couldn't tell that from this side. So I need 4 of those. So I'm going to, see now I moved it around, didn't I? So which way was I? I was this way. This way. Yeah. So my straight of grain is on my left side. So I'm going to fold, and I'm going to fold that little, and you see how where I cut off? I'm just going to fold that in because I think that'll give me plenty. And I want to put my short side, oh, here we go. The short side of my die is going to go along that straight of grain. Okay, and I can tape it if I feel I need to. So I'm going to just, and I take the fabric and dye. Oh, I got 2 pieces of tape there. You're 1 now. Fabric and dye and everything that way because the metal shim is so slippery that I just taped it. And you see? So I taped it, the fabric and the dye, and I taped to the metal shim. Excuse me again for reaching in front of you. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm just going to tape it out this way. So the tape is on the metal, it's on the fabric, it's on the die. Okay, so I'll give you a second to get there. So my square is right here. My half square is here. Then my plastic shim is going to go on. And then my pretty, well, it's not the prettiest, but my prettier clear plate is on. And now I've got to move my machine forward. I just want to make sure you can see my plate. Oh, you can see it there, okay. Okay, my machine is on. So go ahead and put your sandwich into your cutter. So I have just enough room. Okay, so I guess I'll go this way. So this is my good plate. The plastic shim I'm going to turn over. Set those aside. I'm not going to turn it and turn it. I'm just going to turn it over, see how that works. I want to take off my cut pieces. So there's my square. And here's my 4 half square triangles. I'm going to hang on to my tape here for a minute. Take my 2 dies off. So remember I told you I go ahead and just trim off the parts I'm not going to save. So I'll save this one because I can maybe get a half square triangle out of that sometime while we're cutting this project out. And then I still got that quite a bit left from that 10-inch square. So now I'm going to turn this over. And I'm not going to go down and I'm not going to set things in the same spot I did before. I want to move it around and make marks all over the place. So now we need our background fabric. And we need 4 squares and 4 half square triangles. So if I fold this way, I can't get 4. Let's see. Yeah, you can see I'd have quite a bit left over. So let's see, 4 and 4. So this is just an odd piece of fabric. So I'm going to fold down so I get 2. And I'm going to, and again, normally I wouldn't cut it, so you don't have to cut yours. But I'm going to cut it just for simplicity's sake for the recording. So I have this fold. Oh, I got to check for where my straight of grain is. So my straight of grain is right here. So let's try to make me consistent. And my straight of grain is going to be on the left side of my metal shim. So I'm going to fold this over. And I'm going to fold again. And I'm going to come over this side over here. And remember, I'm going to try to stay away from my fold to see if I can keep an extra bigger piece of fabric. So you can see I'm setting it down. Oh, now I've got to be careful because I have a fold underneath that was nowhere near the top fold. Okay, so now I moved it around again, didn't I? So if I was if by myself at home, I would probably just put a clip. Let me do that because you're at home. So let me find a colored one that you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I know where my straight of grain is, which is right here. So I'm going to put my clip there. You see my clip? So that every time I keep moving this around, it won't matter. I know where my straight of grain is. So I'm going to fold it in half and then fold it down again. And I'm trying to get all my raw edge ends to meet down at the end. They don't have to be perfect, but see, now I still know where my straight of grain is because I got my clip on there. And I'm just going to leave that there for the moment. I'm going to get my die. Make sure the groove side is down. Okay. And I'm going to place it here. My fold is up this end. And I'm going to stick a piece of tape on there. And now I can take that clip off. Okay, that was pretty easy using the clip. So now what we need is four half square triangles. Almost forgot where I was. So fabric again. And let me see, if I fold this, it's going to be about the same as the other one. I just have to remember when I'm measuring this, because we got one long end that doesn't want to be, you don't want on the straight of grain. So let me do my straight of grain. Okay, so my straight of grain is here. You see it okay? And I'm going to, so the straight of grain, I'm going to have the short side up on the straight of grain. So now I know I can cut this. And now I'm going to fold the same exact way. I'm going to fold it over. Oh, I didn't leave my, I forgot I was a double fold, wasn't I? So I don't have enough to do, see, it's too little. So I wasn't thinking that I folded it in half and then folded the opposite way. So what I'm going to do is, because this is going to happen, so I should have enough after I cut these two to cut over here these two. So rather than try to fold like I'm an origami expert, I'm just going to tape this in place. And again, my straight of grain on the short side of the half square triangle. Make sure I take that off. Okay? So you set up like mine is? Or some reasonable facsimile thereof? You see, it feels awful dark there. Is that lighter? Okay? So I'm going to get ready to offer it in. I'm going to take these down just so I don't lose them somewhere. Okay? Plastic shim. The pretty lady. And I've got to move my machine. Thing is heavy. Couldn't do it with one hand. Oh. Move my machine forward. Don't need to knock everything down when I do that. Okay. Offer it in. Okay, so I'm just going to set my machine out of the way a little bit because I'm going to take off my grid plate. Stay there. My plastic plate, I'm going to turn over and then I'm going to turn it around. My metal plate, I'm going to leave right where it is. So I'm going to take this one off, the square, and I'm going to take the half squares that I cut, and I'm going to go right ahead and put this on. I'm just going to move it over to a different spot. But see, I've got plenty of, you can see I have, oh, let me see if I can just tape this. So see, I had plenty of room to put the other two. And I may just turn this. I haven't turned this yet, so I'm going to remember the bottom plate. I'm going to give him a little whirl. Put my plastic one back on. Put my clear plate on. There we go. Now I can set that back out of the way. And I should be done cutting. We'll just double check and see. So I'm just going to set those up there for now. My 2 dies. Oh. I'll move those before we go too far. Okay. So let's see what I have. I've got my 2 dies sitting right there. Got tape all over one of them. There we go. So I have my pile of squares and then a pile of half square triangles. Oh, excuse me. So let me get rid of some of this mess first because I kind of like to clean as I go. Let me check and see if anybody has any questions. Hi, Gloria, you made it. Hi, Cindy, you made it too? That's right, better late than never. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim this. It just seems easier to me to trim off the scraps, put the pieces you can use aside, and then just throw them away. So normally right now I would put my dies away, but I'm not. I'm going to set them right here. So we want to lay out our star or our block, whatever block you're doing. So I know this gold one is in the center, and I have to make sure that I've got right sides up. So I know the 4 corners, and I have a little wrinkle in mine because I thought I had ironed it, but apparently whatever piece I ironed is not right here. So I don't want you to, don't do as I do today. Make sure your pieces are all ironed. And I have to keep looking to make sure which way is up. So I'm gonna spread them apart just a little bit. So we have a background in the main fabric. Background in the main fabric. And if you notice, one of the short sides of the gold half square triangle is touching the center square, if that helps you any. So what did that take us really? About a minute, 2 minutes to cut? That was kind of fun. Oh. Okay. So when you lay that out, it should look like your picture here. It should look like your picture. Okay? So I'll give you a second to do that. I'm going to get a little sip of my water. Okay, so we have all the pieces we need. We can put away, we can shut off our machine, put away our stuff. Again, I'm going to put my dies away later on, but what I am going to do is see if I can move my Gemini a little more out of the way. and bring my sewing machine forward. There, that's pretty good. Let me bring this light up because I know. Oh, that way I don't have so much shadow there. Put that down. Okay, so let's double check. We have regular sewing thread in. Check. I use a Microtex 8012 needle. I have the baby lock. I'm using my J foot for my stitching. So I'm going to use the straight stitch on your machine, and it has a P, the letter P for pie. And you'll see that straight stitch on the screen is just a little right of center. And again, if you're using the 1/4 inch foot with a guide, then don't use that stitch because you want your needle in the center because you have a single hole foot. Single hole foot means if you tried to zigzag, you'd break your needle. I'm just going to use 2.5 of my stitch length, but I am going to put my pivot on. So if you have a pivot, go ahead and put that on. So the first thing I want to do is, let me move this up a little so you can see it better. I have my fan on, so I'm waiting for my little pieces to blow away. So we practiced a couple weeks, excuse me, we practiced a couple weeks with our sewing, and we have done this block before. So if you're new to doing this block, you can always go back to the Gemini. I don't remember if it was block 1 or block 2, but it was one of those. So because these half square triangle sections are all the same, we can sew them all at one time. So I'm looking for my pin cushion. Oh. Did you yell to me everything's behind me? So I'm going to go ahead and flip this one over so my long sides are together. And remember, we're going to put a pin in the side we're going to sew. And I'm just going to set it there. I'm going to go ahead and grab the next one, flip them over. So we're on the long side is where we're going to sew. Okay. Flip the next one over. And I'm not lining them up perfect. I can do that when I get ready to sew. And flipping it over. And it doesn't matter if the white's on the top, the dark's on the top. I tend to do it all the same way because I just do, I guess. Okay, so now we have our 4 half square triangles ready to sew. Okay, let me check to see if there's any questions. No, we're good. So I'm going to bring this in a little more. I'll try to turn it more so you can see. Okay, so here's my little pile. Here's my pins on the right. So when I bring it up to the machine, I can go ahead and take the pin out because I know I've now got this lined up. The pin was here. Okay, I shouldn't get into too much trouble between here and my foot. And remember, we're sewing with, here, you see that a little better? We're sewing with, if you look at your half square triangle, instead of coming to the point, it's kind of got like a blunt cut. And we're going to sew just inside of the right side of where that blunt cut is on the left. We're going to be right of the left side. That's a good one. Okay. And we're just going to sew at a moderate speed. And I'm going to stop when I get near the end. I'm not going to cut. I can do that all at one time. You can cut if you want to. That's up to you. But I'm going to chain piece them. So I'm lining it up again, the next one. And I'm just getting it under my foot, not too close to the first one, because you don't want to sew one fabric on top of the other fabric. And when I get near the end, I'm going to stop, pick up my next one, make sure it's lined up. And I would normally be facing my machine the whole time. I just turn this way so you can see. So if I always stay facing my machine and keep that long side on the right, I should stay out of trouble. And you really should hang on back here. I was trying to be out of your way, so I'm creating all my bad habits now. Stopping again before I get to the end. Lining up my next one. And now that I'm done them all, I'm going to stitch to the very, very end and cut my thread. And here's my little group all in a row. So I'm just going to cut one and put it in each section, just so I know where everybody goes. Now when I open these, I'm going to open, and I want to have my seam allowance behind my main fabric. So I want to make sure that I set it down with the main fabric, my gold fabric on top, and I'm just going to push it open. And I'm just going to get my little roller. And what I want to make sure that I do is I don't want to have a little crease right where my seam allowance is. Okay, so I'm going to grab another one. Again, I'm going to put it so that my gold fabric is on top. So whatever your main fabric is, I'm going to push it open with my fingers and then just give it a little press. I don't really want to press with an iron at this point because I'll stretch that little block out of shape. And I don't want to do that. If you feel the need that you really have to, just press. Just open it up with your fingers and then just bring your iron down straight and just hold it for, count to 3 or so. Okay, so let's finish getting our little sections ready. Okay, so now I've got to put these back in the order they're supposed to be. So I'm going to look at my picture. So I still want it to look like a star. So are you looking like a star? Is there any questions? You good so far? Let me just double check. Okay. So now, and we practiced this the last couple of weeks. So again, if you're new to watching this, you might want to go back and watch, block 1 and 2. I don't remember if we did it 3 times. Because I go into a lot more detail each time. So what we want to do is we're going to start our little, I call it, we're gonna like web our block together while we're sewing. So just like reading a book, so we're not doing rows, we're going to do columns. So this is column 1, column 2, column 3. So I'm going to take row 1, the second column, flip it just like the page of a book. I'm going to go row 2, flip it just like the page of a book. And row 3, and again, flip it just like the page of the book. Okay, before I pick them up, I'm going to get my pin, and I'm going to pin on the side where I'm supposed to sew. Or I should say where I better sew. So I didn't really pick them up. They're still right in the same place. But now I'm not sure if you can see my pins, but I have a pin, one pin on each one of these on this right-hand side. So I flip column 2, just like I turn the page of a book. I flip column 2 on top of column 1. Oh, sorry about that. Neighborhood motorcycle. So now I'm just going to pick these up one at a time. So I'm just going to pick up the first one, get lined up how I'm supposed to be, take my pin out. And I'm just going to put my pin over here instead of reaching across on you. And I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch just like I did before, making sure that the two fabric, the raw edge of each square is lined up. Okay, and we don't have much to hold on to, so I've kind of got my finger right here because that's where the two ends are. And this one over here, let's see if I can do it without getting my finger. Whoop, totally in your way. And let me do that again because I wasn't on my fabric, I don't think. So yeah, so I wasn't on my fabric. So it started the fabric will start to go down in the feed dogs, in the hole of your feed dogs. So these things will happen to you. And what happened is it stitched a lot in one place. So let's see if I can get that all out. I don't want to shred my fabric. But these things will happen to you, and it's okay. You never get to a point where it doesn't happen. And boy, it made some little tiny, tiny stitches. So let's see which way I can get to it best. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that I lay this back down and I look at my book to make sure I laid this back down, because when I pulled it apart, I was turning it and so forth. So I'm going to lay it back down and look at my book and make sure it's right. If I had to undo these to make sure my star's right, I would do that. It's no big deal. I'm going to flip this over again, pin it. Okay, let's bring it over and try that again. And you guys, you can go ahead and don't wait for me. Go ahead and get your sewing done. You can be ahead of me. Okay, I'm going to stop just like I did before. When I get near the edge, pick up my next one, bring it over, then take my pin out. Make sure everything is lined up. Push it in. Don't butt it up right against the other one, because you don't want to overlap the two fabrics. You'll do that sometimes. It'll happen. Picking up my last one, making sure everything is lined up. Okay, I'm done my 3, so I can cut my thread. Oh, let me put my seam ripper away. I don't want my seam ripper to think we're becoming best friends. And I'll put my pins back. So, so what we're going to do is, because see, now they're going to stay together like they're supposed to. So I'm going to open this up. So I got to make sure I've got the right end to the right end. So if I open this up and lay it down, and I'm going to press the seam to the left. I'm pressing the seam to the whole square that doesn't have any seam allowance on it. Okay, so Rhonda was asking me if my middle one is right. I hope so. We'll find out in a second. So this time I'm pressing my seam to the right. Again, I'm pressing the seam to the whole square. And I'm going to open up my bottom one. I'm praying, Rhonda. And I'm going to press that seam to the left again towards the whole square. So I think I'm okay. I still look like a star. So let's look at our picture. Yes, 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 yes. So we all good so far? You made me nervous, Rhonda. Okay. And I just finger press for now because I can press a little better when I get it together further. So now column 1 is attached to column 2 and row 1, 2, and 3 are attached to each other. So now hopefully we can't get out of order. And it looks like a little spinning star. So now we're going to do the same thing with column 3. We're going to turn it like turn the page of a book. 3 goes on top of 2. Okay, so you notice I did that. I didn't move anything. I didn't pin anything. I want to get them all over there first. Excuse me. Get my 3 pins. And I'm not going to pick it up. I'm just going to make sure. That's why I keep the cutting mat under, so I can put my pin down and go into the fabric, and I'm not scratching my table. Because you will scratch your table if you don't have something under there. Even if you have a little mat, any kind of mat's fine. So I'm putting my pins in before I even pick them up. Okay, so now this time when I pick them up, everything's attached. I just have to keep the pins. I'm not sure you can see my pins. My pins are on the right hand side. They're over here. Okay, so now normally I would have on my extension table. So this would kind of sit up here on my extension table. I don't have room enough for it. So once I put it up here, everybody's kind of laying in the order they're supposed to be. So I'm going to take my first pin out. I'm just going to make sure I line my fabrics up. And I'm going to start my sewing again. I'm going to stop a little sooner this time because this is pulling it right underneath. So I want to have enough left to work with it. So I stopped maybe a ½ inch from the end of my first one, and that's fine. And I took my pin out of my second section, made sure everything's lined up. And I'm going to stop, take my pin out, make sure everything's lined up nicely. Oh, I turned my speed down. My speed's a little high. count my thread. Now when I bring it back, it's really going to be in the right space. So this right place. This time, remember, I'm going to push my seam allowance towards that big square. So I'm pushing it away from another seam. The middle one, I'm going to push the seam towards the center because that's the whole square that doesn't have any seam allowance. And then the bottom one is going to the right towards that square again. So how are we looking? You looking like a star? You all look like stars. So I'll give you a second to make sure you're caught up. I'm going to put my pins back away because I can't help myself. We check for messages. Okay, so let me see what this one says. Can you lay the, well, yeah, got something in my way here. Hold on. Can you lay the star you have sewn next to the picture of the table runner, please? Oh yeah, mine's backwards. Is that what you're saying? It is backwards. So here's my table runner star. And here, let me see if I can you see them together? Let me see if I can hold it up. So mine's spinning in the other direction. I think maybe that's what Rhonda was trying to tell me. So I'm spinning in the other direction. That's okay. I can spin right or left. When I drew this one up, to be honest with you, good eye, Gloria. I wasn't paying much attention to that. So no matter which way I turn it, it's not going to be like this one is. So if you look at the picture, the top one, the gold is on this side, and the gold is on this side. So it's just one spinning this way and one spinning the other way. Well, Gloria, we know you don't need any glasses. So that must have been what Rhonda was trying to tell me. Sorry, Rhonda, I wasn't getting that. Okay, so yes, my star is the reflection of the star in the picture. I'm okay with that. Okay, so now we have this piece, and see now it can't get out of order. So now we got to sew our rows together. Oh, you have your glasses on. Gloria says she's got her glasses on. Well, they're good glasses, Gloria. Okay, so now we want to sew row 1 to row 2, and then sew on row 3. So really all we have to do is just flip this down. It should pretty well line up. So if I flipped it down and then I pick it up, and I got in detail about this before. Oh, see, the fan came by. Put that. Oh, let me do that. There we go. So one seam is going left, one seam is going right. So they nestle side by side. And this end should go to the end of the one underneath it. So I'm just going to put a pin in right after that seam. I'm not going to try to stick it in the seam. That's just too much fabric to deal with. And then I'm going to go to the next intersection of seams. And now the top seam is going right and the bottom seam is going left. So I want to make sure, and I want to feel all the way down this, not just right here, but all the way down. So that way I know the whole block is straight. And I want to look at my end, make sure my end is straight. And again, I'm going to pin right after the seam allowance. Now, I can catch a little bit of the seam allowance here. I just don't want to pin right in where the stitching of the seam is. Okay? So the top and the underneath should be lined up. And then row 3 is just kind of along for the ride. So I'm going to start stitching. And I want to pay attention to the seam allowance on the top is facing back or facing towards the foot. That means as we come sewing by, the foot can turn that seam and flip that seam back towards me. I don't want it to do that. So as I get closer, I'm going to stop. If I don't have pivot, so pivot, put your needle, when you take your foot off your foot pedal, the needle goes into the fabric and your foot comes up a little bit so that you can adjust. If you don't have that, just reach back and lift your presser foot up a little bit just so it gets over that flapping edge of that seam allowance. And I'm going to stitch slowly up until I get in where the two seams meet, and then I'll take my pin out. And now my only concentration now is to get to the next juncture. This seam allowance in the middle that's on the angle is facing towards me, so that's not going to be an issue. I just want to make sure that I want to look underneath. Underneath is a plain block, so we're okay. We don't have to worry about it. Now I'm coming up on my next seam juncture. So this seam allowance on top is facing towards me. The seam allowance on the bottom is facing towards the back of the machine, which means now the feed dogs can start doing some funny business and flip that seam allowance towards me. So I just want to just peek under there and make sure that it stays down where it's supposed to. It might flip, they do now and again. It's just, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. And it's not your prom dress, so we're good to go. So I stitched up to the seam. No, I had a little bump there. So I'm going to guess with that bump that I had that my seam allowance underneath came towards me. And if it did, then I can show you what to do when that happens. And I'm going to finish sewing that edge. So let's see if it flipped over. No, it didn't flip over. If it had, so if this underneath seam allowance had flipped over to the wrong way, you can just take a little clip in the seam allowance. Don't clip your seam, but just clip a little in the seam allowance, and then you can have the rest of the seam going the correct way and that little bit going the wrong way. Mine kind of is, I don't think you can see it. It's kind of like halfway in between. Kind of bunched there, but it'll be okay. It's just a block. So we can open that up and we can look and see. We got our little points pretty good. So now we have this bottom piece to put on, the bottom row. So we're just going to flip it up. And it doesn't matter if you sew this way or that way. I'm going to sew this way, so the two pieces are underneath and the single row is on top. So again, I want to line up my seam allowances. Put a pin in just after my seam allowance. And the same with this one. And I want to make sure my top square is coming down. It's not staying even. So that's why I want to make sure that I feel this seam the whole way down, because it'll make this block sit straighter or lay straighter. Okay. So if you feel like your block's kind of going rogue on you, you can always stick a pin over here. Once they're lined up, it should stay. And remember, make sure you're lining up across the top so the front and back are in the same place, lined up along this edge. If you need to pin at the beginning, pin about more than an inch in, because if you pin at the very end, you can't start sewing without taking the pin out. So if you pin down further, these two edges will stay together, but you can at least get your, what I would do, and I'll do it now, is I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to sink my needle, which means I'm just going to turn my wheel and get my needle in. So my needle is my third hand, and I can take that pin out. So I'll just turn my wheel so that my needle is down in my fabric. It's holding those two ends together. I can take my pin out. And now I can go ahead and sew. And again, I want to be careful when I get to that seam, because the top seam is facing towards the foot, so the foot can flip it backwards. So if either stop and use your pivot, or just reach back, whichever side you're on, and lift your foot up. You just have to lift it up a little bit. You don't have to lift it all the way up. Just to make sure that fabric of the seam allowance stays where it's supposed to. And I'm stitching up to my next seam juncture. Taking my pin out, I'm going to look, as I'm not quite to my seam juncture, and make sure. So I want to make sure, I don't have my stiletto here, so I'll use a pin. I want to make sure that my seam underneath is facing, it should be facing towards the back of the machine. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm running my pin underneath my fabric, just to make sure that seam allowance fabric stays facing the back of the machine. Okay, and I can take that pin out that I had on the side. Put my pins where they belong. And I can move my machine back. And there we go, there's our star. Okay, now what we want to do when we get ready to press is, if you turn this over to the back, mine, and I'm sure yours is probably the same, is pretty much that the two seams want to go out automatically. So generally I go with that. I don't fight it, because you're trying to force it to go away. It doesn't want to go, and it's going to flip back on you when you're starting to put your blocks together. So I'm going to look at it this way and just kind of give it a little flattening. And then I'm going to turn it over, because I want to make sure